Kirk says, Robert and Austin, I love your podcast. My wife and I have lived below our means for 43 years and invested the difference in stocks. Our adult children are 28, 35, and 37 years old, and they also know that we've done quite well, but I suspect they'd be shocked to learn our net worth is approaching $10 million. We've never cracked the top income tax bracket and still maintain a modest lifestyle with a budget of about $120,000 to $140,000 a year. We have no interest in the lifestyles of the rich and famous. We're in our mid-60s, we're both nearing retirement, but we still love what we do. So here's my question. At what point, if ever, do you consider disclosing any financial details to your adult children? Our estate attorney gave us a verbal template of a talk we can have with them, giving them the permission to be very straightforward and firm with their decision-making as it relates to us driving as we get older, maybe having a safe place to live when we're older, and then what to do about our estate as a whole. I played the needed role of financial gatekeeper and overseer for both my parents and my in-laws during their declining years, and I think my daughter's probably going to do the same for us eventually. We've not yet executed a durable power of attorney naming any of our kids. They each are earning six figures and have demonstrated wonderful financial habits. At their ages, I don't see any of them ever operating with an entitlement mentality. What are your thoughts on this? How do we approach having this conversation with our kids? Robert, you want to kick this off?
Yeah, I love this. And I'm just going to assume that you have everything in order. Otherwise, hopefully you have any property, through a holding company and a revocable trust. Hopefully you have proper wills in place because you want to make sure you're not going through probate on any of your estate. But assuming all of that is done, I think, in my opinion and through my experience, I would be very cautious just coming out and having a meeting with the three of them and saying, hey, we have this net worth of over $10 million. Here's where we're at. Because what you don't want to have happen is start the infighting early. I see it all the time where there's 2-3 children and someone is always angling earlier than others and trying to figure out how they can get the lion's share of the net worth of the parents as they get older. And I would just be very cautious with that. Or get your paperwork all in order so it clearly spells everything out, and then try to have that conversation with them and really point out and say, here's where we're at. We wanted you to know earlier, and then that way they can have some planning along the way. Because I will say that I've seen people, I had a dear friend who basically through his 30s and 40s just really took his foot off the gas, didn't care about his bills, didn't care about his debt, because he had an elderly father who he thought was very wealthy, only to find out when his father passed that he died penniless, and then this gentleman got nothing and then had to basically start over at 47 years old. So I think it's good either way to really not share the information until you have all your ducks in a row in paperwork, or share it all with them as long as everything is spelled out properly so you don't cause any infighting with what appears to be a very happy and thriving family. That would be my opinion.
I think it's a great take. I think I'm going to take the other side of that. I think that the earlier you have these conversations, the better. You mentioned that your adult children are all earning six figures. They've got wonderful financial habits. They are not operating with a sense of entitlement. I mean, you didn't say any red flags here that makes me think that these, adult children are going to do something bad or, live their lives differently with this information. I'm also a really big believer in having those conversations early with your children. I remember growing up, my dad had conversations with me when I was in middle school and high school saying, hey, here's what we have set aside for college. If you go through this, you're on your own for student loans. I went through it. I had to go get student loans, but I was prepared for that because I had that information already kind of given to me. I also think that there's something to be said about blessing your children when you're still alive and they can still benefit from the money. I guess what I'm saying is I can understand it being really frustrating for you to live to your 80s or 90s and then your children are in their 50s or 60s before they get any of your estate. How cool would it be if instead of that you could help your 28-year-old maybe buy their first house, or help your 37-year-old get the 529 plans in order for their children, assuming they have children, or maybe help the 35-year-old, build their brokerage account up to their first 100,000. I mean, there's a lot of really wonderful things you can do with money with your children, assuming that they're going to take it well, which again, you mentioned that all these positive financial habits and, not an entitlement mentality. And there's a book called Die with Zero that kind of goes through all this stuff. So maybe you should give that book a read. But I think at the end of the day, having a net worth of $10 million it's a lot of money. Do not get me wrong, but it's not so much money where I think it would drive people crazy. Now, if you said you had a net worth of 100 million or something crazy like that, I would be very careful as to who knows that information, including your family. But $10 million, I think, is yeah, we know mom and dad got money like that. We know they've been good. And I'm glad to know now that my mom and dad have got, the power of attorney figured out. And we've got all these trusts and, everything in order from our structuring perspective. And I know that, once I turned 42 years old, I'll get $250,000. And once that happens, I can only use it for a down payment on a house or putting their grandkids through college, things like that, right? So I'm just a big believer in having those conversations, because if you don't have those conversations now, no one knows what's going to happen after you die. Because I would much rather look my kids in their eyes and say, hey, this is what I'm doing with my money and this is what's going to happen with it and here's why I'm doing that, versus I'm dead and some person is now saying, all right, here's the will, here's what they wanted you to do, here's what the executor wants me to do. I just don't like that. I want those conversations to be open. I want to be able to trust my children. I want them to trust me. And everything you mentioned here seems like that can be the case.
Now, another fun exercise that we could talk through that could really work out, like you said, Austin, is do something fun while you're alive. Having 3 kids in that age category, you could look at the gifting process. You can give, I believe it's still $16,000 a year tax-free. So if you gave $16,000 a year to each child, that'd be $48,000 a year. Maybe you talk them into that going into their retirement accounts and you give that to them year over year until they're 50 years old or something, or whenever you set a date or an age. And that could be a lot of fun to help them build wealth as well without paying any taxes on the money that you gift.
That's true. That's totally true. I think at the end of the day, it's a personal choice. And you are the only one that can make that choice. But by looking at the information you shared, it seems like your kids are going to take it in a positive manner and that you can have these conversations with them. I think it was Shaquille O'Neal, actually. It was like an interview. He said, if you want the cheese, you need 2 degrees, right? So he's like, if you want all the money I made, if you want to be my child and get some of my inheritance, you need a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, right? And so all his kids are educated, right? So that was part of his succession plan. And so maybe, Kirk, you've got something of that nature yourself. If you want the cheese, you need to have so much invested on your own, or you need to, whatever, go figure it out. But I think having those conversations are smart.
I love it. That's a great scenario to be in. And I love really exercising our thoughts on stuff like this.